I was really pleased to be rewatching Thank God for Scoliosis because I love Carol Kane. This is a pretty funny episode. Granted, most episodes of Two and a Half Men are pretty funny. This is the 12th episode of the 6th season. This is directed by Jeff Melman, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And this one starts off down at the chiropractor's. Alan and Melissa are flirting. They end up kissing. Alan then talks with Charlie about this, and it is worth remembering that Melissa did spend time with Charlie, so it could be an awkward situation, but that doesn't really seem to be an issue for Alan. And Alan says that they work together, they can't do anything about this, so he's going to channel his feelings into something creative, to which Charlie responds, "You're going to have sex with the vacuum cleaner, aren't you?" It's not exactly what I expected Charlie to say, but definitely helps to show where Alan's head is at. He goes to talk with Melissa. They're not going to do anything. And then Alan is at home later on that night. He ends up rushing off to Melissa. So Charlie takes Jake to the bar. The scene at the bar wasn't necessarily that interesting, but it did lead us to a really funny scene, which I'll talk about in a moment. Alan then, of course, arrives at Melissa's, and her mother is there. And this is, of course, the wonderful Carol Kane. She plays a character called Shelley, and she is... well, she's an absolute joy. She's inappropriate. She's showing Alan a photo album of when Melissa was a child, but by child, I mean halfway out of her mother's vagina, in the middle of being born. Needless to say, Alan is very uncomfortable, and it's an absolute joy, and I think that Shelley is a very well-written character. Carol Kane is absolutely fantastic, and I rather enjoy her in this episode quite a lot. Back to Charlie and Jake. This is just the exchange between them I absolutely love. When they were at the bar, they met Janine. They're now with Janine having dinner, and she's played by Emily Rose. She's an okay character. We don't really get to spend that much time with her. A lot of these scenes she's actually in the kitchen so that Charlie and Jake can bicker, because Charlie is thinking he's going to get lucky with Janine, but actually so does Jake. And Charlie says to Jake, "The woman's got to be 10 years older than you," to which Jake responds, and I love this, "So, you're like 15 years older than her. Step aside, Grandpa." The grandpa bit was a bit uncalled for, but it is a valid point. Granted, Jake is still quite young, so the 10-year age gap is probably more significant than the 15-year age gap for the two much older adults, but nevertheless, it is a valid point, and Charlie's not having any of this, so he tells Jake, "Go wait in the car." And Jake responds, "You go wait in the car." I love the exchange between them in this scene. I just think it's absolutely brilliant. And then we go back and forth with Alan and Charlie and Jake. And then we're back with Charlie and Jake a little while later. And while Janine is in the kitchen, Charlie and Jake are bickering again. And Charlie says to Jake, "You don't know who you're messing with." And Jake starts to say quite loudly all of these things that really paint Charlie in a bad light and make him look abusive. And after doing this, Jake turns to Charlie and he says, "You don't know who you're messing with," which is it's just fantastic. I thought Jake was really brilliant in this scene and an absolute joy. And it makes me wonder... well, I'll give that thought at the end because it's a bit of a spoiler, but I'll come back to that in a little bit. And then Charlie, who's had enough, ends up phoning Alan. And obviously Alan's busy with Melissa, but he answers the call. And while he's on the phone, Shelley comes back through and asks if Alan would be interested in a mother-daughter tag team. And we end the scene, or the end of the episode rather, with three Harpers out on the deck, and they go off to their own bedrooms for some alone time. And they all have very different ways of announcing what they're going to do, and it's a fine way to end it. I don't mind it too much. Jake is still quite young though, so it's not the most comfortable, but it's otherwise fine. Shelley was just an absolute joy as a character, and Carol Kane was brilliant, and Jake also absolutely stole the show. I thought Shelley and Jake were just the two big highlights of this episode. I thought they were both fantastic. And ultimately, I think it's a very funny, really enjoyable episode. Thank God for Scoliosis is an absolute joy. And if I were to name my top 10 Two and a Half Men episodes, I probably wouldn't have ever thought of this one. But it could be a contender. From start to finish, apart from the scene at the bar, which I thought was a little slow, but necessary to get us to the next step. apart from that, everything is just really beautifully executed and very, very well done. And I thought it was pretty fabulous. And the spoiler point that I was going to make, so this is a spoiler for something that happens in a few seasons' time. So if you haven't finished watching the entire show, I don't have anything else to say that isn't a spoiler, but this is a big spoiler. Although chances are you're aware of it anyway, but nevertheless. What happens in a few seasons' time, of course, is that Charlie is no longer in the show. And it just makes me wonder what the dynamic between Charlie and Jake could have been like if both Charlie and Jake were around a lot more, or at all in Charlie's case. I think it could have been quite interesting. But maybe talk more about that when we get there. For now, I'll just say again that Thank God for Scoliosis is a really brilliant episode of Two and a Half Men, and one that I really thoroughly enjoyed rewatching.